What's up everybody, Jared here with carbuzz.com, and today I am bringing you a review of the 2023 BMW M4. It's been about a year since I last drove this car. That was a 2021 model, and admittedly, this is a 2022 model that they've sent me, but it's pretty much identical for 2023. So we're just gonna go ahead and call it a 2023 for the purposes of this video and talk about 2023 pricing because that already is out. Now, the big addition that has been put on the M4 since the last time I drove it is that you can now get an all-wheel drive M4, which is what we have in front of us. So that is based on the M4 competition, which we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of what the competition versus the base means. And this is the first time BMW has ever offered all-wheel drive on an M3 or on an M4. So let's go ahead and start with the exterior, where not much has changed since they introduced this new G82 generation version of the M4. We still have the very large kidney grills that you all on the internet have told me that you absolutely hate. Honestly, I'm kind of over it. I think it looks pretty aggressive, which is what most M4 drivers really want out of their car. And I don't necessarily love it on the base 4 Series, but I think on the M4 it works quite well, especially with this color, which if you're wondering why you can't find this color on the configurator, that is because BMW was nice enough to send me a BMW individual color. So this is BMW's program where you can basically pick any color under the sun that exists. It's $4,500 for this particular color. It's called Santorini Blue, and it is absolutely stunning. I'm so happy that BMW sent me this really cool color so that I could see it and so that you could all see it. There are so many other options available that you can get as well. You can get lime green or orange, like whatever you want, which I think is such a cool thing to offer. And it is much cheaper than Porsche offers it for. Porsche's is like $12,000. So just so you know, $4,500, you can get pretty much any color you want on the M4. Now, this is one of like 3 available wheel sets that you can get on this car. I think all of the wheels on the M4 actually look great. I think this one looks really cool. They almost look like scalpels, the spokes here. We've got the little M logo in there, and we've got some red brake calipers as well. 6 pistons up front, floating calipers in the rear. They are vented disc brakes as well. We've got 275 19-inch wheels, 275 width here on the outside, Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. On the back, we're gonna have a 20-inch wheel with 285 section tires. So a little bit wider in the back here, staggered look. The M4 is the 2-door version. The M3 is the 4-door version. I happen to prefer the way that the M3 looks. It just has more of like a square stance, where this looks kind of a little bit long to me, and the doors are a little bit long as well. So personally, I prefer how the M3 looks, but we'll talk a little bit more about the changes to the M3 because there are some more differences between the 2 cars for the 2023 model year than just the door count. Now back here, we have our M4 competition badge, but there is nowhere on the outside of this car indicating that it has all-wheel drive. The only way to tell that one of these has all-wheel drive is to check out the infotainment system. We also have our quad exhaust that looks quite nice as well. We have our little lip spoiler that I think is just aggressive enough on this car. And we do have an optional like convenience package. So when I go ahead and open up the trunk, it is fully powered, and we do have a button to close it up there as well. You get like 1 cubic feet of trunk space less in the M4 versus the M3, but this is a pretty capacious trunk, honestly. Like, it goes back pretty deep. The opening is very wide. So in terms of 2-door, 4-seat sports cars, this trunk is fantastic. I really think you could get a lot in this trunk, and it folds 40-40-20 down, which is quite nice, and it's very easy to do that right here from the trunk by pulling these little handles. So in terms of trunk space, very good on BMW. It's also pretty good in terms of the back seat. Actually, before we talk about the back seat, I want to show you the remote start. So a lot of BMWs have remote start, but it doesn't make it very easy, or at least not very noticeable. So there's no button on here that lets you know that there is remote start, but if you click this BMW button, which is the lock button, 3 times in a row, it'll cold start. So you have to do, I think, 3 times within like a second or something like that. So let's just hit it 1, 2, 3. and then it should remote start. There we go. Ready? And there you go. That's how you remote start an M4. If obviously it doesn't do that, when you click it 3 times, your vehicle just doesn't have it. But that was a little secret in case you didn't know. So now let's talk about that back seat. And I mentioned that it's pretty good because you just pull this little lever right here. The headrest is going to slide down, and then when you fold it forward, the front seat is going to move as far forward as it can physically go, giving you the most space possible to get into the back seat. And then I'm going to go ahead and hop in, and I'm going to pull this back so it's going to go back to my ideal seating position so I can show you how much leg room we have. And it's going to stop. And my knees are not even touching. I have a decent amount of headroom as well. Obviously, you'd have more in the M3. You'd have more legroom as well. But this is not a bad back seat by any stretch. This might be one of the best back seats that I've been in a two-door car where I actually feel decently comfortable. In fact, the M8, which is like a larger overall vehicle, actually has a tighter back seat than this. So I am very impressed with this. We do have air vents back here. They didn't skimp out on that. We have our own climate controls and 2 USB-C ports. So I have plenty of amenities back here as well. So listen, it's not an amazing place to spend time, but you're really not losing all that much in the back seat if you opt for the M4 versus the M3. So just something nice to note. We have the sort of white leather interior on this, which looks gorgeous. I love the white, especially when paired with the Santorini blue. The problem with it is you're gonna see just like a little bit of discoloration here, especially on like these bolsters and things. It's gonna be very difficult to keep this clean. So something to think about if you're like a neat freak that wants your interior to look perfect. But again, the seats I think look gorgeous. These M bucket seats. We've got the little M4 logos. These actually light up at night, which is quite a nice feature as well. And now we're gonna go ahead and fully step into the interior where we can talk a little bit more about the differences between this 2023 M4 and the 2023 M3, because there is a significant difference. So I have it remote started, but you are still gonna have to hit your stop start button to fully activate the system. Now, here's where the main difference is going to be between the M3 and the M4, and this might actually influence your purchase decision because this is the familiar Idrive 7 setup. So we have 12.3-inch screens both here and here for the gauge cluster and the infotainment system. If you get the 2023 M3, this screen is going to be larger. I think it's like 14.3 inches. This screen is going to remain the same size, but it's going to look more like the iX and the i4. Go ahead and check out my videos on both of those cars, the electric BMWs. They're going to be more flush with each other and curved screens as well. So the dash layout is going to look very different in the M3. You also get the newer version of BMW's Idrive 8 software. So a little bit different menus, a little different features as well. The gauge cluster is also going to look different. You're going to get more functions. So in Idrive 8, you can actually get your Apple Maps navigation to show up in the gauge cluster, which I think is a great addition. So there are some really nice tech upgrades there on the M3. However, you do lose something as well. So with Idrive 7, you have all of these physical buttons down here. So this car has the heated and ventilated seat package. The ventilated seats are like $750. Definitely get those. Like they're super nice. And you can't get those. I should mention you have like a bucket seat option in this car, like carbon fiber bucket seats. They look gorgeous, but I would not get them if I was daily driving this car. I had them the last time I drove the M4. Be sure to check out that video as well. I'll link it in the description below, but I would not get those. I much prefer these base seats, especially with the ventilation. But all of these buttons are going to disappear on the M3. They won't be here. So just doing simple things like adjusting the fan speed real quick here with this button, not going to be available. What you're going to have to do on the M3 is click climate menu on the touch screen, pull up a separate menu on the screen, then adjust your fan speed. So if you don't like missing out on physical buttons, get the M4 over the M3 because you are going to lose these. You're also going to lose your preset buttons here. I love these. So you basically wave your finger over it and you're going to see I have like Sirius XM stations like saved under here. You can also save navigation destinations as well. These are also going to go away on the M3. All versions of BMWs with Idrive 8 just don't have these anymore. And I loved this feature, so I don't know why they've been getting rid of it on Idrive 8. So that might be one reason why you might want to keep the M4, just saying. So this system is pretty good. Honestly, like I don't see too much of a downgrade versus Idrive 8. In fact, with the physical buttons, I almost want to say that Idrive 7 is a better option. Now down here we have our Idrive Controller, nothing really new about that. We have our M shifter, which is interesting here on these M cars. So this is going to allow you to change between 3 different shift ferocity modes. So basically you push it up and to the left, and that's going to put you in reverse. We have our 360-degree camera system on this car. That is optional. Looks great, has great markings and great visibility and everything. You're going to pull it down and to the right, and it's going to go ahead and put you into drive. Tap it over again, is going to put you into manual mode, and then you can push P for park. We've got our M modes as well. So that is just going to change our gauge cluster. So the one thing that I really like about Idrive 8 is that the gauge cluster does a little bit more than it does in Idrive 7, but basically you can shift between this type of gauge and this type of gauge, which is a little bit more track focused. And the only way to change like what's on the side here is on this little button on the turn signal stalk. You can change it to show fuel economy. I've been averaging like 20 mpg in this car, which is not bad at all. Horsepower boost, what radio your song you're playing, stuff like that. And if I push this button for setup, that's where I'm going to be able to change all of my different M functions. Let's see, I have to get out of the menu here. So here's where you can adjust all of the different elements of the car: engine, sport, sport plus, efficient, chassis, same thing, comfort, sport, sport plus, steering, comfort or sport, brake, comfort or sport, and M xDrive. So if you put it all the way down into 2-wheel drive, which you can only do if you turn off the traction control, then you can unlock this M traction control, which we'll talk about a little bit out on the road. And once you find your ideal setup, you can save it to one of these 2 M buttons here on the steering wheel, so you don't always have to set this up every time. You can just save it to the M1 or M2 button. We've got a carbon fiber package here, so we have carbon fiber on the steering wheel, carbon fiber here on the console lid where the cup holders are down here as well. I like the carbon fiber look as well. You also get these big paddle shifters. You can see they kind of go very high up and very high down as well, and they have this nice like red rubber backing. This is so much nicer than the base paddle shifter on this car, which is only about like that big, which I've complained about to BMW, so I think they've rectified it here with this carbon fiber package where you get these big nice paddle shifters as well. We also have a package on this car for gesture control, so you can like spin your finger like this to turn on the radio. You can mute it using 2 fingers. It works most of the time, but it does accidentally trigger sometimes as well, which is a little bit annoying. You can also do things like set it, like if I do this with my hand, it'll pull up the M menu, which is kind of cool as well. So if you like sort of gimmicky things like that, you can go ahead and opt for that as well. And that is pretty much everything I need to go over on the interior. So let's go ahead and get the M4 out on the road. All right, now let's get the new BMW M4 xDrive out on the road. So the last time I drove an M4, it was the absolute base model, which it kind of sounds even funny to call it that. So I drove the BMW M4 with the 6-speed manual transmission. The only way to get that manual transmission is to get the base car. And I call it a base car, but no matter which version of this car you get, you're going to still get BMW's amazing 3-liter twin turbocharged S58 inline 6 motor. And in that manual transmission car, it produces 473 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, which I think are plenty of power and torque. That is 48 horsepower and 59 pound-feet of torque more than you got in the previous generation M4. And even with the manual transmission, which is not going to shift anywhere nearly as quick as the 8-speed automatic, you're going to hit 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds, which I think is plenty plenty quick to scare your friends. It's really good. I loved that car. I think that a lot of my auto journalist colleagues did not like it. They said that the transmission was a little bit rubbery, the clutch wasn't that great, and I'm like, compared to what? This car really doesn't have any contemporaries that offer a manual besides the two Cadillac Blackwing cars, and those are both sedans, so you can't really directly compare it to the M4. But other than that, nothing else in this segment still offers a 6-speed manual transmission. So I think that the engagement that it offers is more than what you're going to get from this automatic transmission, and I think you are going to have plenty of fun driving the manual M4. But since I'm not driving that today, let's focus on the competition model. So that is going to be automatic only. It's an 8-speed automatic, regular automatic, not a dual clutch transmission like the last M4 had. You're going to get more power, 503 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque. Big upgrades in both zones, meaning that you'll hit 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds in the rear-wheel drive version. You also get a higher red line of 7,200 RPM with higher boost. This 8-speed automatic transmission has 3 shift ferocity modes, 1, 2, 3, 3 being the most aggressive, and of course you can shift it manually with these big, nice paddle shifters that we have here via the carbon fiber package. I love these paddle shifters. They don't feel that premium compared to some other vehicles in this segment that I've driven, but they are much better than the tiny little ones that they've been doing on other M vehicles at this price range. Now, the big addition here is xDrive, all-wheel drive. This is the first time that BMW has ever offered all-wheel drive on an M3 or on an M4. They've done them previously on M5s and M6s. And that is an interesting addition to me because honestly, by adding all-wheel drive to the M3 and M4, it kind of makes me wonder why you really need an M5 or an M6 unless you just, or M8, unless you really need like the big size of the M5, because of course that is significantly bigger than an M3. But in this M4, the M8 actually has like a more cramped back seat. So I think you might actually be better off with this all-wheel drive M4. So BMW says that with the M active differential, power is really going out to the rear wheels most of the time. It's only feeding power to the front wheels when you really need it in low grip situations. And you can even deactivate the all-wheel drive fully and just go rear wheel drive mode. So you really get the best of both worlds there. And you can basically slide this car around, do full drifts just like you would with the rear wheel drive version of the car. But the advantage that you get is off the line. So BMW says this will do 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. That is almost a half a second quicker than they quote for the rear wheel drive car. But in independent tests, some outlets have been able to get this car to 60 miles an hour in under 3 seconds. We're talking like 2.9 seconds, which is really only a 10th off of the M8, which has like 600 horsepower. So this thing is just ridiculously quick for the amount of money you're spending on it. So let me go ahead. I have it all. I have pushed the M1 button. I have everything in the most aggressive setting. So let's see launch control. Are you ready? Ready? And go. Oh my God. Just, whoa, my goodness. No drama, no wheel spin, just pure unadulterated speed. Whoo, my goodness. It just pulls and pulls and pulls that higher red line all the way to the top of it. This engine, I told you I love this engine. It just does not feel turbocharged. It sounds like a normally aspirated inline six. It sounds like the S52 or the S54, that normally aspirated inline six. It crackles, but not in an obnoxious way. It's not like an AMG where it just goes pop, 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 pop. It just does a little pop, 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 pop. Oh, yeah, that is a smooth engine. I absolutely love this engine. It is the best part of the car, the way that this sounds. Now, in terms of handling, we've got standard adaptive M suspension that it's always a little bit firm. You're always going to kind of feel the bumps in this car, but it's not too bad. This is a decent highway cruiser. It does not beat you up ever, which is quite nice. We've got M brakes, which are front 6-piston calipers, single floating calipers in the rear with 2 modes. I don't love the sort of 2 modes, how you can make like the brake pedal a little bit sportier. That is not my favorite part of the car, but I don't know, I'm not that big of a stickler on brakes. We also have really advanced traction control that has 10 stages of wheel slip. So I mentioned that you can fully defeat the all-wheel drive system. So I'm gonna go ahead and push M2. So that's going to put me into my rear wheel drive setting on this car. So now I have the all-wheel drive system completely off. So I'm driving basically a rear wheel drive M4 now. There is something called the M Drift Analyzer. It's like this silly feature BMW put in where you can pull drifts if you're brave enough to do that on a public road, or you just happen to have a racetrack, and it'll tell you your like star score on how good your drift was. And the traction control has like a bunch of different settings, like 10 different modes. Oops, sorry. Gesture control on that dang radio. I told you that activates. I told you that activates all the time. I got completely derailed by that. So yeah, basically you can tell it how much slip you want to allow, whether you want to pull some really big slides and you don't want the traction control intervening, or maybe you're a little bit of a novice driver and you want the traction control kind of fully on. So now that I'm in rear wheel drive mode, if I put my foot down, yep, a little bit of more wheel slip there. But as I learned driving the manual transmission version of this car, it's still really grippy. Those tires in the back are still pretty wide. So even when you drive this in rear wheel drive mode, it doesn't really feel scary. It's just really nice to drive all day long. It's so ridiculously fast. It's amazing that we now have an M4 that feels like it can do supercar speeds. Now, at this point in the review, I need to separate my opinion as a reviewer from my personal opinions, because from a review standpoint, this car is amazing. It is so fast. It's so competent. It works well as a daily driver. But personally, I have a problem with it because although it's fast and although it's amazing and it sounds good and it's very comfortable, it doesn't feel that fun to me. And I think the big issue here is the steering. This is something that I am pretty much lockstep with my colleagues, my other auto journalist friends about. This steering is just dead. It's not communicating back to me. It's very responsive. It does everything I need it to do, but it just doesn't like play with me. And the problem with this M4 is that I can't enjoy it at normal speeds. The speed limit on this road is like 35 miles an hour, and like I can take these corners like at those speeds, but there's just so much grip and not enough communication coming through the wheel that I'm just not enjoying this that much. I'd have more fun in a Miata or a Subaru BRZ where I'm kind of pushing the limits of grip and, you know, just enjoying the steering a little bit more. In this, I'm just telling the car what to do. It's competently doing it, and that's about it. So that's my one problem with the M4, is that it's a little bit too much of a serious car. It takes speed way too seriously, and it kind of sacrifices that pure, silly fun that I like to have in the car. So if you're like me, maybe this is not the best car for you. I honestly think that the manual transmission helps a little bit more to make this car a little bit more silly, but objectively, this car, if you're gonna get it, all-wheel drive, 8-speed automatic transmission, it is one of the most well-rounded sports cars money can buy. All right, so that was the 2023 BMW M4. Let's go ahead and go over pricing. I would probably just stick with the base M4 for $74,700. If you want to step up to the competition, that's $78,600, so about a $4,000 upgrade for the competition. If you're going to go ahead and do that, you might as well step up to the all-wheel drive version for about $4,000 more. That's about $82,700 for the xDrive version of the M4. And if you want to do it up the way that this car is done up with all the different packages, if you want an M individual color like this gorgeous Santorini blue, that's $4,500. And with those other packages, the total as tested price of this car is about 95 grand. That is a ton of money to spend on an M4. But like I said, the performance on this is so close to something like the M8, I think it's worth it to spend the money. Now, I forgot to mention while we were driving, but there is a new M4 CSL model that's lightweight, track focused. It's got 542 horsepower, the most that we've ever seen from an M4, but it costs $140,000, which is twice the price of a base M4. So you can load up an all-wheel drive M4 competition like this one and get an individual color for less than that CSL model. And if you have to ask me whether or not that's worth it, I mean, come on. I guess it's gonna be special edition and they're gonna be worth a lot later down the line, but I think you would be just fine getting one of these all-wheel drive M4s, just a regular one, getting a cool color like this Santorini blue, and call it a day. I really hope you've enjoyed this review of the 2023 BMW M4. For more videos like it, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. And if you want to read more about the BMW M4, be sure to check out carbuzz.com. I'll see you next time.